So you have to ask yourself, do you think human creativity matters? Well,
hello, and welcome to the very first video of It Is That Deep. My name is Amber, and on this channel, we are going to dig in and explore deep analysis of books, movies, and TV. Today, we're going to talk about the art of storytelling, the effect it has on our lives, and why it matters at all. Specifically, we're going to dig into the 1989 movie Dead Poets Society, refer to the nonfiction book Story by Robert McKee, and the 2020 TED Talk with Ethan Hawke titled Give Yourself Permission to Be Creative. As a warning, for this and every video, I will be openly discussing spoilers for each of the pieces of media I cover. In this case, that's obviously going to be Dead Poets Society, but I also mentioned spoilers for Disney's Tangled and Star Wars The Empire Strikes Back. I'm going to mention a couple other movies, but with nothing significant spoiled. Alright, let's dig into it. Dead Poets Society is a movie from 1989, directed by Peter Weir and starring Robin Williams as Mr. John Keating, Robert Sean Leonard as Neil Perry, and Ethan Hawke as Todd Anderson. Oh my goodness, look how young they are. For the record, when I think of Robert Sean Leonard, I think of this guy. And we all saw Ethan Hawke from 2020 at the start of the video. Don't worry, we'll see more of him soon. The story takes place in 1959 at an all-boys boarding school called Welton. The school is very rigid and is considered a funnel to Ivy League universities. Neil is a returning student whose father tries to control every aspect of his schooling and ultimately his future, demanding that he become a doctor. Todd is a new transfer student who becomes Neil's roommate, but is very reserved and unsure of himself. The story begins at the start of a new school year when the school administration announces that the previous English teacher has retired and is going to be replaced by Mr. Keating. The typical attitude of the teachers of the school is study your Latin, study your chemistry, study your business. It's just very rigid. But Mr. Keating comes in with a new style and really shakes things up. Through his unorthodox or even strange teaching methods, he encourages the boys to seize the day and be bold and think for themselves. This is met with opposition from the school administration, which forms a major part of the conflict in the movie. The title for the movie comes from the name of a club that Mr. Keating was a part of when he himself was a student at Welton. When the boys ask him about it, he explains that he and several of the students used to retreat to a nearby cave where they would read and discuss poetry and determined to suck all the marrow out of life.
You mean it was a bunch of guys sitting around reading poetry?
No, Mr. Overstreet, it wasn't just guys. We weren't a Greek organization. We were romantics. We didn't just read poetry. We let it drip from our tongues like honey. Spirits soared, women swooned, and gods were created, gentlemen. Not a bad way to spend an evening, eh?
After this conversation, Neil proposes to start the club up again, and that night a group of boys from the class meet in the cave and recreate the Dead Poets Society. Over the course of the movie, the club and Mr. Keating's teachings have a profound effect on the boys. Todd finds his voice. Neil finds a passion for acting, although when he and his father clash over it, it sadly ends in tragedy. Because of the impact he had on his students, Mr. Keating is blamed for what happened to Neil, and is forced to leave the school. Despite this downer of an ending in the plot of the movie, the main theme of the movie, thinking for yourself and making an impact, does end positively, when Todd, despite the demands of the school director in the room, stands and leads the other boys in thanking Mr. Keating for all that he did for them. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but I really love it. Although I will admit that some of the emotional impact is undercut a little after seeing the Community episode that parodies this.
All your lives you were told, don't stand on your desks. Well, why not?
The book Story by Robert McKee is a nonfiction book that covers what makes a story and the best way of telling one. It focuses primarily on screenwriting in that it talks several times about the types of stories and ways of telling stories that are best for screen versus book versus play, but it also talks a lot about structure and putting meaning in your story. Because of that, as readers and viewers of fiction, we can find the best way to extract our own meaning from a story that someone else has written. The book also talks a lot about why we tell stories in the first place. Why does this matter? Why this story? Why are you writing at all? It's because you want to tell your audience something. The TED Talk, Give Yourself Permission to Be Creative, is presented by Ethan Hawke. Now, as a full adult, as Dead Poets Society came out in 1989, and this TED Talk came out in 2020. Given the state of the world at that time, TED Talks weren't exactly being presented at conferences anymore. They were instead being recorded with the speaker talking alone to the camera and then posted online. The talk itself is really great. It's only about 10 minutes. I have a link to it in the description below. I highly recommend checking it out. In the talk, Ethan Hawke discusses his experiences as an actor. One of the things he brings up is the question as to whether we need creativity at all. He points out that for most of us, we don't really think about poetry or creativity in our day-to-day lives until suddenly life throws us into an extreme of some sort. Maybe we lose someone close to us, or maybe we fall in love, or any other type of extreme emotion that we might not be expecting. And then suddenly we're looking for guidance from someone who's been there before. And we can find that guidance in creativity. He points out in poetry, I would add in fiction. As he puts it, that's when art's not a luxury, it's actually sustenance. We need it. So, what is art? Well, in Story, we read art consists of separating one tiny piece from the rest of the universe and holding it up in such a way that it appears to be the most important, fascinating thing of this moment. Life is made up of millions of little pieces, little connections. And the beauty of fiction and other forms of art is they're able to take any particular piece and teach us a lesson about it. So, for example, in Dead Poets Society, the primary lesson, in my opinion, is to boldly think for yourself. There's lots of other sub themes and subplots and sub lessons we can take from it, like follow your passion, like Neil, or find your voice and confidence, like Todd. And there are so many other stories and other forms of art that also teach their lessons depending on what piece of the universe they take. And they teach us these lessons, whether we realize it or not, by making us feel something. There's a scene in Dead Poets Society where the boys have been given an assignment to write their own poem and present it in front of the class. This is, of course, agony for Todd, who is terrified of speaking and even more terrified of his own perspective. But the other boys have their own insecurities to overcome as well. At the start of the scene, another major character named Knox Overstreet, played by Josh Charles, presents his poem that he wrote about a girl he has a crush on. It's a very straightforward poem about romance, but the other boys start to snicker. Ooh, he's writing a poem about a girl. So he kind of awkwardly finishes and sits down feeling dejected. Mr. Keating comes over and says, "Oh no, you did a great job. It was a good effort." And then he says, "Your poem touched on one of the major themes, love. A major theme not only in poetry, but in life." And we see that in all types of art, themes that reflect our lived experience. In contrast, Mr. Keating asks Todd to present, and Todd admits that he didn't do the assignment. Mr. Keating rightly observes that Todd is afraid of himself and doesn't feel like anything within him is worthwhile. So he brings Todd up to the front of the class and through a series of prompts, encourages him to improvise a poem. The resulting poem's a little surreal.
Picture of Uncle Walt up there. What does he remind you of? Don't think. Answer. Go on.
A madman.
What kind of madman? Don't think about it. Just answer again.
A crazy madman.
Oh, you can do better than that. Free up your mind. Use your imagination. Say the first thing that pops into your head, even if it's total gibberish. Go on. Go on.
A sweaty-toothed madman.
Good God, boy. There's a poet in you after all. There. Close your eyes. Close your eyes. Close them. Now, describe what you see.
I close my eyes.
Yes?
And this image floats beside me.
Sweaty-toothed madman.
The sweaty-toothed madman with a stare that pounds my brain.
Oh, that's excellent. Now, give him action. Make him do something.
His hands reach out and choke me.
That's it. Wonderful, wonderful.
And all the time he's mumbling.
What's he mumbling?
Mumbling truth.
Yeah.
Truth like a blanket that always leaves your feet cold.
Forget them. Stay with the blanket. Tell me about that blanket.
You push it, stretch it, it'll never be enough. You kick at it, beat it, it'll never cover any of us. From the moment we enter crying to the moment we leave dying, it'll just cover your face as you wail and cry and scream.
It's maybe a little odd, but it still says something. It says that truth is something that should comfort you, but in the end, it just leaves you cold, blind, and afraid. Todd's poem might take a little more puzzling out than Knox's poem, but they're both valid poetry. Art can be about familiar topics, like Knox's poem was, or it can be a little more confusing, like Todd's poem was. But art should still have some sort of meaning. Even if that meaning isn't readily apparent, it should leave some sort of imprint on our lives. In the TED Talk with Ethan Hawke, he describes an experience from when he was younger when he and his brother went to see the original Top Gun in theaters. They both came out of the theater completely blown away for completely different reasons. Ethan Hawke came out of the theater thinking, "Wow, isn't acting amazing? I want to do more of that." His brother came out of the theater thinking, "Wow, I want to join the military." The movie accomplished the goal of all art, which is to say something and affect people, even if two of the people affected took completely different lessons from it. And of the millions more people who saw it, there are probably millions more lessons taken from the movie. There are two movies that I really love that are really different from each other. There's Academy Award-winning Whiplash, and there's Mean Girls, the original 2004 version, not the musical or the remake. Whiplash is dark, more than a little depressing, and has really interesting themes worth exploring. Mean Girls is bright, silly, and also has really interesting themes worth exploring. Being a comedy with a happy ending doesn't make Mean Girls any less worthy of a movie than Whiplash is, even if it didn't win the same awards. Both movies speak to me personally, and they speak to me in different ways, and that's true of just about every story I've enjoyed. And even if a story doesn't appeal to me personally, it means something to someone, and that gives it value and makes it art to that person. So what about literary analysis? In Dead Poets Society, Mr. Keating tells his students, now, when you read, don't just consider what the author thinks, consider what you think. This echoes a literary concept called the death of the author, which comes from an essay of the same name written in 1967 by Roland Barthes. In the essay, he argues that we shouldn't interpret the text based on the author's history or intentions. He also says that stories are made up of many layers, and that readers will develop their own interpretations based on those layers. Ethan Hawke and his brother are a great example of this concept. Readers, or viewers in the case of movies and TV, will take their own history and what's in front of them and develop an understanding of it. That said, I do disagree with Barthes just a little bit. I think that the author's history and background and the context in which a piece was written, and yeah, even sometimes the author's intention, should be part of the consideration. But we should always consider, what do I think? What impact has this had on me? Or, for you watching this, what do you think? Which brings me to my goal for this channel. I'm here to share analysis and meanings of different pieces of media as I understand them, but my interpretation is hardly definitive. Other people will have their own interpretations of it, and that's great. That's part of the joy of fiction, speaking differently to different people. I want to invite that discussion. Share your reasons for interpreting something differently than I do. I want more people to dig into fiction and really consider why they feel the way that they feel. What I don't want is for people to shrug their shoulders and say, it's not that deep. Every story has meaning to someone. There's a scene early on in Dead Poets Society where Mr. Keating teaches his first lesson on poetry. He asks Neil to read the start of the introduction in their textbook, written by J. Evans Pritchard, Ph.D.
Understanding Poetry by Dr. J. Evans Pritchard, Ph.D. To fully understand poetry, we must first be fluent with its meter, rhyme, and figures of speech. Then ask two questions. One, how artfully has the objective of the poem been rendered? And two, how important is that objective? Question 1 rates the poem's perfection. Question 2 rates its importance. And once these questions have been answered, determining the poem's greatness becomes a relatively simple matter. If the poem's score for perfection is plotted on the horizontal of a graph, and its importance is plotted on the vertical, then calculating the total area of the poem yields the measure of its greatness. A sonnet by Byron might score high on the vertical, but only average on the horizontal. A Shakespearean sonnet, on the other hand, would score high both horizontally and vertically, yielding a massive total area, thereby revealing the poem to be truly great. As you proceed through the poetry in this book, practice this rating method. As your ability to evaluate poems in this manner grows, so will your enjoyment and understanding of poetry.
That is the stiffest description of poetry I've ever heard, which I suppose is kind of the point. Also, I like how it seems like Dr. Pritchard has some sort of beef with Lord Byron. Like, I know he had to pick some poet to be considered of lesser quality than Shakespeare, but I just think it's funny that he picked Lord Byron to throw under the bus. But in the words of Tumblr, Lord Byron deserves what he gets, and he knows it. Poor Lord Byron. Anyway, so Mr. Keating responds by declaring the introduction excrement. It's an absurd way to look at poetry, and he rejects it. He then tells the class to rip the entire introduction out. He does not want them approaching poetry this way.
Begone, J. Evans Pritchard, Ph.D.
Amen to that, Mr. Keating. But you know what? I actually like math and technical reasoning. It's always been really fun for me, like a puzzle. I even think it has its place in certain types of art. I have formal training and experience in 3D modeling for video games, and that uses a fair bit of math. Even 3D animators, and 2D animators for that matter, have to understand things like proportion and timing and other technical considerations. And there are other parts of the process that use even more math. But none of that accounts for the way the resulting art makes us feel. In Disney's Tangled, I can marvel at the technological miracle that is the creation and animation of Rapunzel's hair. But I can't use that same thinking to quantify the way I felt when Eugene cut it all off. You don't use a graph to show the impact of that sacrifice. Within story, you can, and if you're writing, you should, map things out using things like scenes and acts and climaxes. But no amount of technical reasoning will explain the way that art can have such an emotional impact on us. For art to make us feel something, it doesn't have to be stuffy. In Dead Poets Society, Mr. Keating introduces a unit on Shakespeare, and everyone groans. He says, yes, I know Shakespeare sounds boring, but that's just because that's how it's always been performed. If you view it through a modern lens, like with modern actors, it can be made much more enjoyable. And fiction of any era that is comedic or accessible or made for kids or is just plain fun can still affect us deeply. Not to mention, Shakespeare himself was not always highbrow intellectualism either. Stories also don't have to have life or death stakes to be of value. In Story, we read, an artist intent on creating works of lasting quality comes to realize that life isn't about hyper-conflicts of master criminals with stolen nuclear devices holding cities for ransom. Life is about the ultimate questions of finding love and self-worth, of bringing serenity to inner chaos, of the titanic social inequities everywhere around us, of time running out. Life is conflict. That is its nature. I previously mentioned the movies Whiplash and Mean Girls. In Whiplash, the main character wants to be the best drummer in the world. In Mean Girls, the main character wants to date a boy in her math class. Hardly world-ending significance for either situation. But that's not really what the movies are about. Whiplash is actually about the question, how far is too far? Is there a line at which being the best isn't worth it anymore? And Mean Girls is really about belonging and ostracization and the fear of not fitting in. They're about something more, and they're usually topics that we can identify with, and that's part of what makes them art. We can also identify with the characters themselves. They may be in fantastical situations, but they still teach us something about ourselves. In the TED Talk, Ethan Hawke talks about his experiences playing a variety of characters.
I've played cops, I've played criminals, I've played priests, I've played sinners, and the magic of this, over a lifetime, over 30 years of doing this, is that you start to see that my experiences, me, Ethan, is not nearly as unique as I thought. I have so much in common with all these people. And so they have something in common with me. You start to see how connected we all are.
Now, it might be really easy to think that Ethan Hawke is just peddling, ooh, famous people, they're just like us, when they're very clearly not. But no, that's not what he's saying. I have about as much in common with Ethan Hawke as I do with Luke Skywalker. But there's still something very endearingly human about Luke Skywalker, even if he did live a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. We see the intense mixed emotions he goes through when he discovers that Darth Vader is his father, and we feel it on a personal level. Have I ever personally discovered that my father, who I thought had died a hero's death, was actually a supreme leader over an army of evil intent on subjugating all life forms across a galaxy? No. That said, I could absolutely hear my dad from beyond the grave being like, are you sure? Are you sure? But I have experienced shock and dismay at the actions of someone I thought I knew. These common emotional experiences allow us to identify with characters that we might otherwise have nothing in common with. Similarly, I don't have the same life experiences or lifestyle as Ethan Hawke, but we do have the same humanity. To a certain extent, all of us experience worry and heartbreak and joy and excitement. We have these emotions in common. So when we see characters go through these emotions, even in circumstances we have never been in, we feel it. Story puts the concept this way. When we identify with a protagonist and his desires in life, we are in fact rooting for our own desires in life. Through empathy, the vicarious linking of ourselves to a fictional human being, we test and stretch our humanity. The gift of story is the opportunity to live lives beyond our own, to desire and struggle in a myriad of worlds and times at all the various depths of our being.
Is a thing that worries me sometimes whenever you talk about creativity, because it can have this kind of feel that it's just nice, or it's warm, or it's something pleasant. It's not. It's vital. It's the way we heal each other.
Story describes another purpose of fiction as the following. The source of all art is the human psyche's primal pre-linguistic need for the resolution of stress and discord through beauty and harmony, for the use of creativity to revive a life deadened by routine, for a link to reality through our instinctive sensory feel for the truth. In life, we don't always get the closure we want. Someone might ghost you, and you never find out why. You might never get to confront the source of your trauma. In an argument, you may never get to state your side, even though you know it would have ended differently if you had. Real life doesn't rely on Chekhov's gun. But in fiction, even when there's a down ending, it ends. We can experience a vicarious sense of closure for parts of our lives that we might not ever get otherwise. A story gets wrapped up neatly with a bow. We turn off the TV, we close the book, we leave the theater, and we breathe a sigh of relief at the small part of us that's a little more healed. And ultimately, as Mr. Keating says, no matter what anybody tells you, words and ideas can change the world.
We don't read and write poetry because it's cute. We read and write poetry because we are members of the human race, and the human race is filled with passion. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for. To quote from Whitman, "Oh me, O life of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amid these, O me, O life?" Answer, that you are here, that life exists and identity, that the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. That the powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. What will your verse be?
Thank you all for watching this first video. I plan to post at the beginning of each month. You can check on my channel what days of the week I'm currently posting on. If you enjoy the video, like and share with your friends. If you have your own take on the topic that differs from mine, put your reasons in the comments below. I'd love to read them. You might even change my mind. If you have a book, movie, or TV show that you really love and want to see analysis of, let me know that too. And if you want to see more media analysis in the future, be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon to make sure you get a notification next time I post. And until next time, keep reading, keep watching, and keep digging deeper.